All right, fans of music, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking about real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. So last night, I think I did one of the funnest interviews I've ever done with the great Hugo Valenti. And again, if you like Steve Perry, and this is no joke. I mean, if you go and watch the interview, you will see a striking resemblance between Hugo and Steve. I've heard people say that Hugo is Steve's younger brother, and vocally speaking, he's right there. People have incredible loyalty to Steve Perry, and they should because he's brilliant. And Hugo is in a Journey tribute band called Voyage, so he's on board with loving Steve Perry too. But during the interview, or I don't know if it was during the interview or prior to it, Hugo said something to me. He said, "Hey man, you're it." And I was like, "Okay, tag, you're it." I don't. But he was basically saying I was the guy that was still promoting the music that he was trying to make. If you go listen to Open Skies, that album. By the way, you spell skies Skyz to be all hip and cool in 1993. There are some epic songs on that album that people need to hear. Again, if you like the Journey power ballad format, which most Journey fans really do love, and Hugo's songwriting and just the melodic nature and characteristics of these songs will just knock your socks off. If you can get a CD of that, probably be a Japanese import, but you can go listen, go stream it. Thankfully, it's up and running. By the way, it's kind of early where I am, so it's still coffee time. So I got to thinking, and I do videos where I talk about this new band. The new band does not have any kind of support system. And people say, "Dave, you go on Spotify. I mean, great. But unless somebody gives you a tip, like, hey, have you heard this group? This other group, Landfall, that came out recently, Brazilian singer that sounds like Steve Perry, Dean Castronovo, and some very accessible material on that record. I've shared some of it with patrons, and I think, done one video, the Brazilian version of Steve Perry. Look, I understand the love of Steve Perry. Steve Perry ain't doing a whole lot right now, and we can pretty much guess that with the world the way it is, you probably will not be seeing Steve Perry going out on tour. All right, there was a lot of speculation for a couple of years. Hugo is trying to get his band back together, out on tour. His band Voyage, where they do Journey songs, and he's been doing that for quite some time, and he's got every right to do it. He was on a fairly short list of singers in the 90s who were considered to be replacements for Steve Perry, and it just didn't happen. And it could have happened. It could have happened as easily as it happened to Steve Augeri or even Arnel Pineda or Jeff Scott Soto, even easier than Jeff. Jeff was basically thrown into that. And it's kind of a shame that things happen to Hugo that way. And again, I look at the universe and fate and all these different factors. You got to realize that just because somebody isn't as popular or didn't make it, so to speak, the way that Steve Perry did, it doesn't mean they're any less talented. This is a guy, I think he told me, 57 years old, which there are a lot of great singers at 57, but he's got pretty much all of his vocal skills, and he is a trained singer on top of it. So any band, by the way, any band who needs that kind of voice would be lucky to have Hugo Valenti as their singer, although he's pretty content and pretty over it. You know, he's been burned too many times. He's tried to record albums with other artists and so forth. The Ramos Hugo album I always talk about. It's a brilliant record. And, you know, probably sold 10,000 copies or something, maybe. Collector's item. People are using it as a coaster. I mean, you could stream it, obviously. And I go look at the streams, and it's, you know, it's not very well listened to. That's why you need someone to direct people to this music. And it seems like I might be one of the only people doing it, at least in this format. I mean, reviewing melodic rock albums is a cool thing. If you want to type in, you know, recent reviews of melodic rock albums, maybe you'll find a site that does that on a regular basis. But people, that we're living in an age where people want to, you know, just click their mouse and find the content and absorb it and learn about it quickly, and maybe have me talk about some other subject and then do a little side promo for the album, the new album I'm talking about. I've done it with the new Perfect Plan record. I've done it since I've been doing this because I knew that I couldn't talk about Steve Perry in every video, even though it looks like I do. I couldn't talk about Journey in every video, even though it kind of seems like I do. There are other things out there, and I kept trying to explain to people, hey, there's other stuff. You should check it out, you know? And I get it. A lot of people, I've had people come back and tell me, hey, I've got my music. You know, I was a child of the 80s. So was I. I was sad to see the 80s dissolve rather quickly, and that's the reason why Hugo wasn't a big success. You know, bands that started in 89 or 90, it was like many of them just hit this brick wall where there was so much promise, so much energy. I mean, I might compile a list of groups that kind of went down the tubes, not because they were bad, but because the industry magically said, we've had enough of this, and now we're moving on. And I'll tell you what, from a cultural perspective, right, that really affected the country. It affected the world, for that matter. But the United States, which, you know, used to be kind of like a hotbed for this kind of music, most of it was being made after that period. Most of it's being made in places like Sweden and Denmark and Norway and Spain and Portugal and now Brazil. But it's not being really made here. There are a couple of instances. There's a band in New York City I dig a lot, Station NYC, but they're few and far between. I talk about Fire Tiger. They're more of a pop rock version of the 80s, and they're fantastic, and they can't catch a cold in Hollywood. It's just, everybody's like, really? You're doing that? Okay, fine. And people are like, yeah, but they should be on the radio. They should be on the radio. There's so much music that should be on the radio. The radio is boring. All these formats are just homogenized. And, you know, the country sounds like the pop sounds like the R&B sounds like the country sounds like the R&B. There's no difference. And the mainstream rock format that I like to rail against, most of it's angry and dark and thumpy, too much compression, not enough just give me a guitar riff I can latch onto. Give me a melody, you know? But it's not there. So yeah, this is kind of the old man again on the front lawn. So again, excuse me here. I don't know. If I'm alone doing this, it's pretty pathetic, because the way I started out, I was a disc jockey. I was a make-believe disc jockey. Then I was a disc jockey groupie. Then I became a college radio disc jockey. And then I became a college radio programmer, station manager, which again, people say college. It's like, hey, it's like double-A ball, right? You play in the minor leagues. You learn things. You learn how to do production. You learn how to do commercials, which I have no interest in cutting commercials. I sucked at it. I did it because I had to do it. I know the equipment now is so much easier to use, but it wasn't my thing. My thing was waiting for records to come in, getting phone calls from people at record labels. They're shopping their wares. We're talking back and forth. We're negotiating. I'm getting free stuff for the station to give away on the air and so forth. That's what I live for. I love that stuff. Being on the air obviously was fun. I didn't have the pipes, the radio pipes that you really need to be super successful. I'm a little older now, so I sound a little better than I did 30 years ago, but I sounded like, Alvin the Chipmunk back then. So it wasn't helping my radio career. So once the radio station changed format, the one I was working at, which was a top 40 station at that moment, and they went over to an oldies format, and we were all just like, what? Needless to say, I should have stayed for a while because oldies music is way better than what happened in the 90s, and I just was disillusioned with it. But I still loved music, but during the 90s, I had nowhere to go. That's why I started listening to country. And but I always, my first love was like the music that Hugo Valenti made, like that kind of music. And when I hear it now, I'm excited about it, but it's like the was it the boy crying in the wilderness? Like, hey, over here, there's music over here. I found it. People like, I got my stash, got my stockpile of music. But if they heard it on the radio, when they jumped in their SUV, all right, and they were tooling down to the 7-Eleven for that, that fresh cup of coffee, and they heard a song by Landfall on the radio, they heard Perfect Plan right next to like Supertramp and REO Speedwagon and whatever else, and they would go, oh, that's kind of cool. That's good. Who's that? And you'd have a support system again. See, terrestrial radio is important. And I know Sirius, a lot of people have Sirius XM. I've done this in videos before. I always cite Tom Petty's song, The Last DJ, where he says, why should I pay for what I used to get for free? And it's a good question. Corporations have destroyed the music industry. They've had a really negative impact. They do all the focus testing. I talk about this all the time. And they don't have any passion for music. They don't have anybody that works for them like myself who would say to them, hey, why not try this? This might work. That DiCarlo album from earlier this year, so melodic, so catchy, would work on adult contemporary radio and rock radio. No way. I'm just thinking to myself, if this isn't going to get airplay, the guy from The Outfield a couple of years ago, Tony Lewis, he had an album out where these songs were just, it sounded like vintage Outfield. So we don't have to hear Josie's on Vacation Far Away every day. It's just the only tune they play by The Outfield. It's pathetic. And by the way, that wasn't their only top 40 hit, but yet it's been focus tested down to one song. When they interview Tony Lewis, so that song you did, that Josie's on Vacation, that was quite a record. That's the record that keeps on giving. No, it's radio that keeps on playing that one song over and over again. And people wait to hear that one song rather than... And you got these guys, the professor there who I commented on, who says, like Stone in Love is a deep track, and here's a song that defined the 80s, even though he was 5 years old in the 80s. I'm like, I don't know. You could make a case for Don't You Forget About Me. You could, there are a lot of, I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but if you're going to have a musicologist, you're going to say, hey, I'm the professor, I'm this person or that person. They should come at it with a little gray hair, maybe. Just saying. I'm not saying that you can't research and figure things out. And that's what a lot of this is. But the people who live through it have the best knowledge of it. You know, people like myself, college radio in the early to mid 80s, that's where I was. I mean, before any of that stuff got to mainstream, I knew what it was. I knew what was coming. And even the underground music, the new wave and the sort of post-punk or whatever it is, um, all of that was fairly melodic and interesting and diverse, and had, you know, you could listen to REM, you could listen to Echo and the Bunnymen, you could listen to Shriekback. There all these bands that were kind of bubbling under that never got to that place. A lot of them probably influenced what happened in the 90s. But again, the 90s just went all dark and negative, and musicians, honestly, that I don't respect. Like, they didn't really play their instruments all that well. And much of the singing was monolithic, sounded all like, you know, Cookie Monster on lead vocals. So that's why when you hear Hugo Valenti say, "You're it," meaning me, which I'm not trying to lift myself up here. It's a lonely business here. Why aren't more people excited about new music? All the musicians I talk to, they're like thankful that I'm doing this, and they wish more people would do it. They wish record labels would actually become record labels again, rather than promoting celebrities, making celebrities into pop stars, because that's what they do now. I mean, the old method of paying your dues and then working your way up, that's done. And with the live music scene completely shut down right now, that I think is going to put the final nail in this coffin. It's going to be really, really tough for new melodic rock bands to have a career. People are inside, they're just going to stream the music, they're not going to buy it because they don't have any money to buy it. Why should I buy what I can get for free? So again, and that goes to the whole streaming revenue thing and Don Henley and all that stuff. And Don, even though people make fun of Don, I think the point is, we used to be able, I understand the streaming revenue is good revenue for people that get millions and millions of streams, but it's different from publishing. It's different from the way those compensations used to be worked out. It's way different. And it tends to favor all these new pop stars that are going to get, 40 million views in a second because every 12-year-old in the world is listening to the same thing, which is just pathetic. And honestly, the technology hasn't helped this. It's made it worse. It's totally made it worse. Between the grunge apocalypse and then the technology that followed, it was like a 1-2 punch that knocked out the music that I think is the better music. But again, music is subjective. And if you want your ears to bleed and that's what you like, then by all means. So again, I want to thank Hugo Valenti for coming on here, and just a great guy. And I like to talk to real people, and he is about as real as you can get. Humble, decent guy, knows his place in the world. I don't think he realizes how talented he is, which again is humility. But a guy like Hugo could have been Steve Perry. He could have been on the same career path as a Steve Perry. When Steve Perry left Journey, right, which was like 87, here comes Hugo in 89 with a debut album with this group Valentine. I mean, if the worlds had aligned properly, and Journey at that point, with Perry not coming back, it would have been a much easier jump to a new contract to say, hey, breach of contract, he's gone. We've got this new guy who looks and sounds like a younger version. Let's crank it up. Now, again, you still had the 90s, and the 90s probably would have been even kind of rough on a reconstituted Journey, but they did do it with Trial by Fire and had some success. It was kind of over. I mean, you can keep rebooting the band, but the band's new music, it just isn't catching on, and it's not because it isn't good quality. It's because everything just changed and the bottom fell out of everything. And yeah, it would help if Steve Perry was still in Journey for those years, but he wasn't. And Steve Augeri did a great job, and so did Arnel Pineda, and Jeff Scott Soto for 11 months did a great job keeping that band afloat. They're a franchise, so people are just always curious. You know, the brand is alive, and Neil Schon is one of the greatest guitarists that's ever walked the face of the earth. So they'll continue, and people will still be interested, but they're one of the few, one of the few that are still able to carry the torch and do so because they have a great brand. But again, it's just sad what's happening. All right. I know I just kind of rambled. This was just like a discussion piece video. Thanks for watching the channel. Thanks for subscribing to it. Today is September 11th. So I would ask everybody to never forget and to honor somebody who's a first responder, a police officer, somebody who risks their life every day so you don't have to risk yours. All right. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.